2-ton truck and the shining, sleek black roadster stopped within inches of each other at the street intersection. In the truck was a nice-faced man in his early 30s. At the wheel of the open car sat a mule-faced man of 60-plus. No damage done, an accident narrowly averted, yet the elderly man who had not given the other his right-of-way was now shouting at the very top of his voice, waving his hands with a fist in one, red in the face and almost apoplectic. It was over in a minute. The truck and the car parted. The well-dressed, apparently intelligent citizen of the community had thrown at the truck driver his last look of malevolence with intent to kill. The young man, who had listened silently to the other's tirade, leaning relaxed over his wheel, parted with these words spoken softly but with a suggestion in the tone that the advice he was giving was good. He said, "Old man, why don't you grow up? Be your age." The advice was excellent, but I'm afraid it came too late. The man in the roadster had grown up all right, but lopsidedly. There are many ways of growing up and becoming a well-angled individual. And according to the Dr. Steinkron, you must realize that it isn't just a question of the state of your biceps or whether or not you have lost all your baby teeth before you're on the way to sensible maturity. We grow in lots of ways or fail to grow, and each manner of growth contributes to the fullness of the life of the individual. There's the calendar age. No need to stress its importance, since it isn't too important. Then the mental age. This is dependent on our drive for self-betterment. The initial impetus is given us in school, and from then on, our degree of enlightenment and knowledge depends upon our innate desire to learn. Probably we know more about the physical age than any other. Suppose that a man whom you never met before sits quietly in a chair. You're asked to guess his physical age. You will usually guess the true decade, often come within a year or two of his birth date. But suppose you're asked to guess his mental and emotional age. Now, you can't do that unless he speaks. And even then it may require more than a few minutes before you have him cataloged. It takes time to dig down through the superficial layers of small talk to determine whether the undersoil is as promising as the top. For example, the boy in the truck knew he was talking to an old man. Even a baby knows whether it's looking at a granddad or at a boy across the street, but the young man in the truck had also divined something else. He knew at once that this older man was emotionally below par. So you can see there's more to growing up than just living, just getting smart, just being healthy. There's the emotional side, which is so important. And without its full development, there's an extreme difficulty in adjusting ourselves to the social life around us. It's well to remember that people's reactions are dictated by their states of mind and health. To be emotionally grown up is to learn not to get in the habit of taking everything as a personal insult. That man in the roadster probably argued with people all day because he thought they were picking on him. People don't pick on strangers. It just happens that the strangers get in the way of their feelings. And so we must train ourselves when young to be tolerant of others. We should intuitively, in all our human relations, each time step over into the other fellow's shoes, which is just the good old golden rule. For instance, don't laugh at people's peculiarities, because remember that after all, you yourself are a packet of subconscious reactions. That we're creatures of habit is another way of saying that often we're nothing but puppets who dance this way and that to the pull of the strings. Sometimes we can rear back and cut the strings. Usually, however, we go through life making the same motions. Live and let live is a good rule in all human relationships. It's invaluable when you're contending with the idiosyncrasies of your older fellow man. His habits have had time to gel. George Amos Dorsey wrote, "Normal old age should be only less delightful than youth. But premature senility is plain tragedy. I spoke with a middle-aged man a few days ago who's a good example of this tragic figure Dorsey wrote about. I knew before we'd talked more than a few minutes that he'd fit into this classification because of this statement. He said, "You know, I don't see why you spend so much effort in writing books which hope to prolong people's lives. You make life seem too important. As for me, I don't care if I die tomorrow," he said. Now, that immediately classified him in my mind as an unhappy man. And for a very old person to make such a statement may at times seem excusable. However, when a man in the 40s says it, then he's prematurely old. I think one of the chief manifestations of premature aging is this willingness to throw in the sponge, this perfectly unnatural acquiescence to surrender a great part of the few billion seconds we were given at birth. For only a man beaten in spirit, one in whom the daily waking is just another one of those days, can admit to a willingness to surrender this spirit.
Have you given much thought to the fact that you create yourself? You do to an altogether unsuspected extent, simply by the choices you make, by the things you decide to do or decide not to do. As Kierkegaard well said, the self is only that which it is in the process of becoming. So it is that an adult can stand in front of a full-length mirror and take a good long look at what he's created. We leave home and we form ourselves into new people, and we learn, as Thomas Wolfe learned, that we can't go home again, that we don't fit as well as we used to. We wonder after a visit as we leave to regain our own lives what happened, if something is wrong, what the strangeness was. It's simply that we're different now, and going back home again is like trying to get a 2-year-old shoe on a teenager. It's not going to fit anymore. We've shaped ourselves into new people, and we've done so by our own decisions. There's no going back, of course, and I guess most of us wouldn't want to, even if we could, although we're acutely conscious of mistakes we've made. We have to remember that each of us is new at this business of living and content ourselves with the fact that most of us have plenty of time to make good decisions in the future. If there's a rule in making decisions, I suppose it would be to listen to that inner voice and try to make decisions that tend to be growth-oriented. There's really no standing still, even if we'd like to. I wonder how many mothers in poor families have said to their children, "I want you to get an education and make something of yourselves." That old term, make something of yourself, carries with it the clear message that we invent, that we make, we create ourselves. I do think, however, that most really try to play it safe. That is, select those decisions which seem to carry the least risk of failure, and by so doing live out their lives well below their real potentials as persons. Sayings such as, "I'm not going to stick my neck out," and "don't rock the boat," to say nothing of the popular "take it easy" and "never volunteer," all indicate a reluctance to live fully extended or at the leading edge of life. In business, every time a suggestion is made that involves any sort of innovation, some old-timer will ask, "Well, who else is doing it?" He needs reassurance that the idea is not completely new, that it's been tested by someone else before he'll venture a yes vote. Professor Sidney Hook writes, "My observations lead me to the conclusion that human beings have suffered greater deprivations from their fear of life than from its abundance."
If any organism fails to fulfill its potentialities, it becomes sick, just as your legs would wither if you never walked. But the power of your legs is not all you would lose. The flowing of your blood, your heart action, your entire organism would be the weaker. And in the same way, if man does not fulfill his potentialities as a person, he becomes to that extent constricted and ill. This is the essence of neurosis. The person's unused potentialities. Now, I think that that's worth our making a mental note about. Think of that. This is the essence of neurosis. The person's unused potentialities. Blocked by hostile conditions in the environment, past or present, and by his own internalized conflicts, turn inward and cause morbidity. Now, here's something that William Blake said that I think we ought to have printed and emblazoned on our wall. Energy is eternal delight, said William Blake, and he who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. Now, I'm going to repeat that. Let's all remember that, because, golly, that could change a person's life, huh? Energy is eternal delight. And he who desires but acts not, in other words, does nothing about his desires, breeds pestilence. Kafka was a master at the gruesome task of picturing people who do not use their potentialities and therefore lose their sense of being persons. And the chief character in The Trial and in the Castle has no name. He is identified only by an initial, a mute symbol of one's lack of identity in one's own right. And in the staggering and frightful parable Metamorphosis, Kafka illustrates what happens when the human being forfeits his powers. Now, the hero of this story is a typical, empty, modern young man who lives a routine, vacuous life. In this case, he's a salesman, returning regularly to his middle-class home, eating the same menu of roast beef every Sunday while his father goes to sleep at the table. The young man's life was so empty, implies the author, that he woke up one morning no longer a human being, but a cockroach, because he had not fulfilled his status as a man. He forfeited his human potentialities. A cockroach, like lice and rats and vermin, lives off others' leavings. It is a parasite, and in most people's minds a symbol for what is unclean and repugnant. Could there be any more powerful symbol of what happens when a human being relinquishes his nature as a person? That's powerful, isn't it? That's what happens to a person when he does not use his potentialities, when he does not use his energy. Because, as William Blake said, energy is eternal delight. And it is. And I really believe, and I think you'll agree with me, that most people, if they don't know that, is because they've never tried. Now, remember what this fine psychiatrist said when he wrote this. If any organism, now that includes the human organism, a human person, fails to fulfill its potentialities, it becomes sick. But to the extent that we do fulfill our potentialities as persons, to the extent that we do fulfill them, we experience the profoundest joy to which the human being is heir. When a little child is learning to walk up steps or lift a box, he'll try again and again, getting up when he falls down and starting all over again. And finally, when he does succeed, he laughs with gratification. And his expression of joy is in the use of his powers. But this is nothing in comparison to the quiet joy when the adolescent can use his newly emerged power for the first time to gain a friend, or the adult's joy when he can love, plan, and create. Plan and create. Joy is the effect which comes when we use our powers. And here's something I liked very much. Joy, rather than happiness, is the goal of life. For joy is the emotion which accompanies our fulfilling our natures as human beings. It is based on the experience of one's identity as a being of worth and dignity, who's able to affirm his being, if need be, against all other beings and the whole inorganic world. This power in its ideal form is shown in the life of Socrates, who was so confident in himself and his values that he could take his being condemned to death not as a defeat, but as a greater fulfillment than compromising his beliefs. Now, we're not trying to imply that such joy is only for the heroic and the outstanding. It is as present qualitatively in anyone's act, no matter how inconspicuous, which is done in an honest and responsible expression of his own powers. Well, now that's the point I wanted to make. This was written by Dr. Rollo May and is in the book Man's Search for Himself, published by Norton, which is considered a classic in its field.
Lin Yutang, the famous Chinese philosopher, wrote, "We do not know a nation until we know its pleasures of life, just as we do not know a man until we know how he spends his leisure. It is when a man ceases to do the things he has to do and does the things he likes to do that the character is revealed. It's when the repressions of society and business are gone, and when the goads of money and fame and ambition are lifted, and a man's spirit wanders where it listeth, that we see the inner man, his real self." Had you ever thought much about that? Your leisure gives you away. I used to know a man who was head of a very large commercial empire. Beginning with nothing but ambition, he became a multimillionaire and finally retired as head of his far-flung company. He bought a large and magnificent yacht with which to cruise the world. And do you know what he did with his free time? He read salacious paperbacks and got falling down drunk and had to be carried unconscious to bed every night. He's dead now. His leisure gave him away. There was nothing there, just nothing at all. He was a one-idea man. Once he was away from that idea, he was a lost child in the wilderness. He didn't enjoy his yacht or his time. Travel meant nothing to him. He was a pitiful, unhappy cipher. His millions, which could have given him access to the whole world, were worthless to him. The thing that's always bothered me is how a human being can live for 30 or 40 or 50 years and find no interest, no charm and excitement in the world. Talk about wearing blinders. I guess it has to do with the way a person looks at life. If it's nothing more to him than getting through one day after another as best he can, that's one thing. But if he's searching for meaning, well, that's something else. It doesn't mean he'll find it, but the search, the journey itself, can be filled with interest and excitement. When FDR first took office as President of the United States, one of his first acts was to call on the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Oliver Wendell Holmes. He was admitted to the old jurist's chambers and found him reading Plato. Justice Holmes was in his 90s. "Why are you reading Plato, Mr. Justice?" the President asked. "To improve my mind, Mr. President," the great judge replied. "To improve my mind. What do you do with your leisure time? It's a good idea to examine carefully this important segment of your life. It exposes the real person, but not the finished person. We can change. We can, like Justice Holmes, still be growing and improving our minds at 92. I don't mean we need to read Plato, although it's an excellent idea, but to find fulfillment, meaning, and interest, we need to grow towards something. When we stop growing, like my millionaire friend with a big yacht, we get sick and die. We may stick around a few more years and go through the motions, but for all practical purposes, we've really ceased to live. We do not know a man until we know how he spends his leisure. It is when a man ceases to do the things he has to do and does the things he likes to do that the character is revealed. It is then we see the inner man, his real self. According to the Bureau of Standards, a dense fog covering 7 city blocks to a depth of 100 feet is composed of something less than 1 glass of water. That is, all the fog covering 7 city blocks 100 feet deep could be, if it were gotten all together, held in a single drinking glass. It would not quite fill it. And this can be compared to our worries. If we could see into the future, and if we could see our problems in their true light, they wouldn't tend to blind us to the world, to living itself, but instead could be relegated to their true size and place. And if all the things most people worry about were reduced to their true size, you could probably put them all into a water glass, too. It's a well-established fact that as we get older, we worry less. We learn that with the passing of the years and the problems each of them yields, that most of our worries are not really worth bothering ourselves about too much, and that we can manage to solve the important ones. But to younger people, they often find their lives obscured by the fog of worry. Yet here's an authoritative estimate of what most people worry about. Things that never happen, 40%. That is, 40% of the things you worry about will never occur anyway. Things over and past that can't be changed by all the worry in the world, 30%. Needless worries about our health, 12%. Petty miscellaneous worries, 10%. Real, legitimate worries, 8%. Only 8% of your worries are worth concerning yourself about. 92% are pure fog with no substance at all. But how do you know which is which? Well, it seems the first thing to do is to stop concerning yourself with things which have already happened and about which there's nothing you nor anyone else can do. Forget them. This is the one that the experts claim does most to wreck marriages. The wife or husband will nurse and cling to things which have happened or have been said in the past and keep exhuming them like desiccated corpses. If the collection gets large enough, and it could easily get large enough in even the best of households, if a person never forgets every little slight or oversight or word spoken in impatience or anger, the marriage will wind up on the rocks. The largest cause of all arguments in the home, incidentally, is worry about money. And this wouldn't be such a problem. In fact, it could be a source of gratification if we could just learn to live within our means and save a part of every dollar we earn. It isn't easy, but it will get rid of the worries and most of the arguments about money. Ben Franklin said there are two ways of solving money problems. Augment your means, that is, make more money, or diminish your wants. Either will do. But the best plan of all is to do both at the same time. Think of ways to earn more money and diminish your wants. In this way, you'll live well within your means and always have a nice surplus of money. People will say that isn't easy. What's easy? What that's worthwhile is easy. It's said that work never killed anyone. It's worry that does the job. Take the fog of your worries and put it where it really belongs, in 8% of the space it's now occupying. Easier said than done, but possible. Hello, this is Earl Nightingale. I remember the first time I came across in my reading the word tessellation. I thought it was beautiful, and upon looking it up in my dictionary, found that it means to form of small squares or blocks or tiles in an order of some kind, as forming a picture in a mosaic. Tessellation is the art or practice of tessellating, of forming a pattern or picture of small individual pieces. A good speaker is a tessellator. He fashions a mosaic in the minds of his listeners by placing one piece at a time until the picture is finally complete. Then he gives us a glimpse of the finished picture in his closing remarks. We might say that in his opening remarks he shows us the matrix which gives order and form to a thing, which serves to enclose it. He shows us where the mosaic is going to be formed, the shape or need of that which is to be formed. Then, in order, one piece at a time, he fashions the picture for us. It's important when communicating with others that we keep things in order. We don't want it to be plodding or pedestrian, tiresome or boring, of course. Each of the small bits that we use to form the picture should have interest of its own, if at all possible. We've all heard the truly great storyteller who tells the story in such a way that each of the parts leading up to the punchline is hilarious in itself. By the time we reach the climax of the story, we're convulsed in helpless laughter. It was a mosaic, all right, and he placed the bits in their proper order so that we could follow him perfectly. But each of the bits was a work of art in its own right. The finished product is a masterpiece. Now, we're not all endowed with the rare and wonderful talent of the gifted and polished storyteller, but we can make our speech in the same way. The whole may be more than the sum of its parts, but its overall quality and integrity will depend on the quality and integrity of each of its parts. As we prepare our speech, we can prepare the parts themselves so that they follow a logical order, and so that each of the parts is in itself of interest, importance, or humor. It's like writing a book. The book has, let's say, 12 chapters. Together they follow a path or tessellation toward the conclusion, the idea behind the book itself. But each of the chapters must be of interest if we want the reader to finish. It's a very common-sense idea, nothing at all new about it, but often a person with an idea for a talk will overlook the opportunity to make the journey just as interesting as the destination. And I think that's part of the responsibility of a good speaker. The cardinal sin of the communicator is to be uninteresting. It's the worst sin in selling, And that's what the speaker's doing. He's selling an idea or a theme or a story to his listeners. And it's his duty to be interesting in all parts of that story. And that's where burning the midnight oil comes into the picture. A good friend of mine told me the other day that he had accepted a speaking engagement to the local Rotary Club. He asked me if I had any ideas and went on to say that he would probably lie awake all night before the day he was to give the speech, worrying about it. I told him that was about the best way I knew of to ruin it. Think about it, of course. When we have a speech coming up, we can't help but think about it. It worries our mind like a puppy with an old shoe. I've got a commencement address coming up next Sunday. I told my friend to give it a lot of thought, remember to stick to a subject he was intimately familiar with, tie it to the interests of the members of the club, then it's my habit to forget all about it and get a good night's sleep the night before the speech. Set the alarm clock to wake up early, earlier than usual, get up, make a fresh pot of coffee, then sit down at your desk and outline the talk you're to give. The method works like a charm for me. I've given the talk a lot of thought. I've done my homework. I've let it do some good cooking, some good percolating in my subconscious. Then, by getting up early on the actual day of the speech, I find it flows out of my mind and onto the paper almost faster than I can write. And there, it's done. There's the idea. There are the tiles that fit in order into the picture. And finally, the complete picture. The whole is good. The parts are good. It will be a good, interesting speech. One last check to make sure the parts are in order. Do they lead in an interesting but unbroken tessellation to the complete picture I want to make? They do. Then I put the outline in my pocket or briefcase and try to forget about it until lunchtime. Now, during coffee at lunch, I will go over it again, perhaps adding something, maybe taking something out, the final touches. Then, all is set. Now, quite often, at lunch or dinner or at a conversational gathering before your talk, you'll pick up several ideas to incorporate into your talk, perhaps at the beginning to better fit it into the group you're addressing. Sometimes I note these ideas on a separate sheet of paper or back of an envelope and put it with my notes on top where I'll be sure to see it and remember it. Then, I do the best I can to make an interesting talk, keeping in mind that while I can take my subject seriously and my craft, I should never take myself seriously. I should keep a good perspective and a sense of humor. If you tend to be an orderly person naturally, you pick up after yourself, like to keep things in neat stacks and know where everything is, chances are you'll put your talk in the proper order without even thinking about it. But if you're the sloppy type, towel on the floor after a shower, leaving cabinet doors open, habitually late for meetings, you'd better take special pains with your speech. There, order is important. Thank you. As a Toastmaster, you should try to find a subject on which you're reasonably well informed and should select some matter on which you have definite feelings and convictions. I don't think these two important points can be overstressed, most especially the latter, a matter on which you have definite feelings and convictions. You know, that's also a rule for good creative writing. If you want to transmit an emotional feeling or content along with what you're writing or speaking about, it's important that your subject be something that's very meaningful to you. Over the years, I've had many people write and visit me to tell me that they want to become public speakers, that they have a tremendous urge to get up before a group of people and talk. I always ask them the same question. What do you want to say? As often as not, it's answered with a long pause and a 1,000-yard stare. They want to be speakers, but they don't have anything to say. My suggestion has been for them to get excited about something, and then start talking about that. I only make speeches on subjects in which I have a deep personal interest, and to which I've devoted many years of reading and research. When a program chairman suggests that I talk on a subject of his selection, and it's something in which I have no particular interest, I decline. Maybe that makes me less than a true professional speaker, but unless I've got something I want to talk about, I don't want to talk at all. May I suggest that you do the same? You'll seldom, if ever, be a boring speaker on something in which you're deeply interested, on something that moves you, that's important to you. If you give the idea some thought, you'll find there are several, indeed a whole spectrum of subjects in which you're very much interested. From your career to your hobbies and sports, I know one of America's most famous dentists who can lecture with enthusiasm on bone fishing, but he's also lectured all over the world, including in Russia, on his pet subject, which is occlusal rehabilitation. He's my old friend and fishing partner, Dr. L.D. Pankey, and his seminars for dentists are famous all over the world. There's a subject that can make all of us jump up and down and get excited about. There's something we do or believe in that we want to tell other people about, and perhaps get them interested in the same thing. As long as we follow the general rules of putting a speech together and stick to our pet subject, we'll make interesting speeches. We'll be asked to come back. In preparing a speech, I'm of the stewer variety. That is, as the day of the speech approaches, I find it difficult to get it out of my mind for very long periods. As I've mentioned in an earlier message, it tends to worry my mind like a puppy with a slipper. The day before my speech, my mind is turning over a number of ideas, and I'll begin to put a folder together for that particular talk. Pick the theme of your speech and write it out in one sentence or two. On it hangs the opening and the closing of your talk. Next, make a general outline, according to your own system, and plan as to timing. If the speech is to be for Toastmasters and you need a few extra minutes, notify the Toastmaster of the day in advance. But with a little extra effort, you can cover virtually any subject matter in the regular time allowed. It takes more work. Short speeches are harder to prepare and deliver, as I'm sure you know, than the long, rambling kind which are dreaded by everyone but the speakers. And after you've got your outline together, rehearse. You don't want to commit the speech to memory, word for word, but you do want to get the sequence of your outline well in mind, so that you can comfortably move from one picture to the next as your picture forms in the minds of your listeners. Remember to carefully avoid anything at all that will appear artificial and affected. Be natural. You have something to give that's unique. Give it in your own way. As to gestures, well, I feel that the proper gestures will come of their own accord, especially with experience, as you lose yourself in your subject. When you're speaking to a friend or loved one about something important, you don't need to be concerned about gestures, yet chances are you gesticulate almost constantly. Let them come naturally, and they'll look natural. Force them, and they'll look forced and wooden. If you'll relax, your habits will take care of your gestures for you. You can forget all about them. If you use a lectern, for heaven's sake, don't lean on it. You can rest after your speech. Stand erect. If you want to rest your hands lightly on the lectern from time to time as it comes naturally, that's fine, but don't grip it as a barrier between you and your audience. Don't play or fool with it or with anything else. It's a distraction, and soon your audience is so enwrapped in whatever your hands are doing they're not even listening to you. Forget your hands, and they'll take care of themselves, as they have a habit of doing all day long. Look at your hands now. What are they doing? See, no one's conscious of them. Forget them. And of all things, don't rock forward on the balls of your feet. I know a speaker who does that, and it's the most disconcerting thing I've ever seen. Keep in mind that you, as a person, should be only the backdrop. It's what you're saying that's important. Think of yourself as you think of the well-dressed person. The clothes of the truly well-dressed person are a background complement to him. They're never of special notice themselves. Just as a well-dressed man would never wear a tie or jacket that calls out in a loud and raucous voice, "Look at me," the good speaker does nothing to distract from the thoughts, the ideas he's trying to get across. He tends to disappear as his thoughts fill the minds of his listeners. Unnatural movements of any kind destroy that. Be yourself, but dress simply and conservatively unless the nature of your speech demands otherwise. My old pal Parky Parkinson of Kansas City, who's made several thousand speeches in his time, wears a red tie. It's his trademark. But a red tie with a conservative suit, a dark jacket, looks fine. If it had a picture of a rocket ship on it, well, that would be a distraction, or low class, as an old friend of mine used to say. To recap briefly, speak about what's important to you. Your anger or enthusiasm or interest will come through and infect your audience. Spend some time in preparation and prepare an outline, the points of which you make a point of learning. I frequently use a small list of points I want to make, in the order in which I want to make them. And be natural, unless you've got some bad natural habits like the man who rocks up on the balls of his feet. Your friends in Toastmasters will quickly disabuse you of any bad habits you might have, and dress for the occasion with conservative good taste, unless the subject matter calls for a special outfit. Thank you. Visual aids, if they're called for, can be tremendously effective if they're handled properly. My good friend Dr. Derm Barrett, the well-known management consultant from Canada, arranges his visual aids well before the people come to the room in which he's to speak. Each of the aids is covered, and they're placed at strategic vantage points around the room or stage, depending on the size of the audience. They have printed on them in big, legible letters very important points Derm is going to make during his talk. They're points he wants to emphasize and give his audience a chance to make notes on. It's tremendously effective. I've sat enthralled during his talks on good management, management by objectives, and time control, and made voluminous notes from his visual boards around the room. He'll have a main point in very large printing at the top of a board, then the lesser or substantiating points listed under it, 1, 2, and 3 order, and so on. If you use slides or an overhead projector, make certain that the printing on the slides is large enough for the people in the back of the room to read. Keep in mind that not everyone has the vision of a peregrine falcon. I've sat in the back of the room and developed a splitting headache from trying in vain to read small typescript or small print on the screen during a slide presentation. Walk to the back of the room and see if someone not familiar with your slides can read them with ease. You should check the microphone the same way. Strive for simplicity. Put only on visuals information that is required to be on visuals or helpful to your audience, such as statistical material, main points of your talk, and so on. Make sure you follow a consistent style and develop a smooth continuity. Remember that word tessellation. You want to place one interesting tile after another until the picture is complete. Make the composition of the visual pleasing and easy on the eyes, but that can be done without expensive artwork. You can do it yourself. Go easy with colors unless you have to make a special effect or want to throw in a little variety to grab their attention. And it's a good idea to introduce your visuals before springing them on the audience, unless again you want to shock or surprise them in some way. The simpler the visual aids are, the better as a rule. But that's not always possible, of course. If your presentation is a new heart operation or a discussion of the wheel assembly of a new jet aircraft, it's not all that easy to keep simple. But the simpler the better. Visuals are not meant to confuse or impress people. They're an additional tool in the business of communication, and they can be wonderfully effective if they're needed and properly done. If funny visuals are used from time to time to add to the interest of your presentation, be sure they're secondary to your message, unless you're making a funny presentation. Humor should be a supportive adjunct to a presentation. It should have some kind of relationship to your subject, so that it's the subject you're talking about that will remain uppermost in the minds of your listeners. In determining whether or not you should employ visuals in your presentation, you should ask, or might ask, this question. Will it help me do a better job of communicating, of transferring the subject in order and intact from my mind to the minds of my listeners? If so, use visuals. If not, forget them. A large pad of paper with a heavy marker can be effective. For this, you need a lavalier microphone, one that hangs around your neck, so that when you move to the big pad, your microphone will go with you. That's not necessary if you're speaking to a very small group and they can clearly hear you without a mic. Turn your head toward them when speaking, however, or they'll miss what you say. If you use this method of illustration, remember to print or sketch large enough so that everyone, especially the people in the back of the room, can clearly see and understand what you're up to. Print or sketch very large, remembering that some people have difficulty seeing, just as people have difficulty hearing. If you're a good printer or cartoonist, this is an especially effective ploy. If you can't print very well, it would pay to practice or have your cards made up ahead of time and kept covered until you need them. Action of that kind adds animation and movement to your presentation, both desirable when they're a part of the presentation. Getting a beautiful and shapely girl to turn the pages of your large pad or board presentation is an exercise in futility. Everyone will be looking at the girl and ignoring your posters and your material. Should I use visual aids? Will they add to my presentation? Will they help me do a better job of communicating? If so, fine. If not, forget them. Thank you. There's no such thing as an unimportant speech. Some are more important than others, perhaps. I imagine that addressing the joint houses of Congress to the United Nations General Assembly might be considered more important than a Monday morning sales meeting, but the principles of the act remain the same. You are there to impart useful or important information in an interesting and memorable way. The opening, the middle, and the end should be much the same in structure, and you have listeners. We're all familiar with the axiom of show business: there are no small parts. There are just small actors. To the good actor, even the smallest part will receive his very best, and I think that's also true with professionals of all kinds. In speaking before a group of people, it's important that you're involved with your subject matter, as we've brought out before, that you spend a lot of time with it and feel comfortable with it. Approach your presentation with the proper attitude, the attitude of calm command. You're in charge, and while you should keep your sense of humor and your proper perspective, remembering that while you can take your subject and your act seriously, you should not take yourself seriously. Look at your audience and see them as individuals and speak to them as individuals. Project your voice so that it will comfortably reach the people in the last row. If you use a microphone, get within range of it, without crowding it, so that your voice may be distorted and you pop your peas. I made a speech in New York recently, and prior to my being introduced, an official of the meeting stood to make a couple of important awards. These awards involved giving the background and explaining the achievements of the people receiving them. But the speaker stood much too far back from the microphone. He gave the impression that he didn't know the mic was there. The result was that no one, not even those of us at the head table, were able to clearly hear what he had to say. He was talking to himself. It was a shame, especially so, since what he had to say was so important to everyone concerned, and especially to those who were being honored. What could have been a memorable occasion was a complete bust. Why didn't the man in his 40s know how to use a microphone? Why did he think that his voice without the mic would carry to the audience? Yes, someone should have told him no one could hear him. If I'd been within range, I would have, but no one did. The good speaker, like the good golfer, has to do a number of things correctly all at the same time if he's to have a successful shot. He should be prepared, no matter how unimportant the affair might seem to him. He should know his subject. He should have the right attitude, not say too much. He should project his voice, or if he's using a microphone, use it properly and not fade in and out as he moves about. He should enunciate his words clearly and watch his rate of delivery, not too fast, not too slow. He shouldn't worry about occasional stumbles or slips of the tongue. He should gesture naturally, appear confident, and be interesting. Yes, it sounds like a big order. It is a big order, but it's not a bit tougher than making a good golf shot. It takes time and practice. Until one day you don't have to think about anything at all except the people and your subject, and you'll make a great speech. Can you imagine a golfer standing so far back from the ball that he can't reach it? Or so close that he has to swing at his feet? Can you imagine a good golfer aiming in the wrong direction or varying his club and effort with the distance of the shot to be made? No, he's natural, he's comfortable, unhurried but not dawdling, and he knows the game. It's true that there are some audiences we'd rather speak before than others. Some make us a bit tense. Others warm us with their enthusiasm and hospitality. We feel right at home with them. Speaking before your good friends and cohorts at Toastmasters is one thing, even though you know they're being critical and watching for mistakes. A church group is different, as is a service club or professional organization. Speaking before attorneys or physicians is different from speaking before insurance salesmen or a union meeting, and each group will affect you slightly differently. Some are cool and a bit distant, and give you the initial impression that they're not at all sure they're glad they have to listen to you. Quite often you're going on late. The dinner took forever. The service people were slow. The people had been sitting a long time, and they're restless and in need of the restroom. There was too much business, reading of minutes, election of new officers, each of whom had to make a speech of his own. You're tired. It's been a long day, and after the meal and all that business of the meeting, you suddenly find that you've lost all interest in what you were going to talk about. You wish you were home, anywhere but there. You dread the thought of having to stand up and make a speech. And that's when you remember the line, there are no small parts, just small actors. That's where they separate the professionals from the amateurs. Because you can get up and make a speech that will hold the real interest and attention of every person in the room, and they'll be sorry to see you stop. Don't let that stop you from stopping, however, and they'll give you a standing ovation. Well, then it's all worth it, isn't it? You go home satisfied and glad you did such a fine job. It's not such a bad business after all. And isn't it great to know how to deliver a good speech? Thank you.
We can achieve nothing without paying the price. Now, what is that price? Well, it's many things. First, it's understanding emotionally, as well as intellectually, that we literally become what we think about, that we must control our thoughts if we're to control our lives. It's understanding fully that, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Secondly, it's cutting away all the fetters from the mind and permitting it to soar as it was divinely designed to do. It's the realization that your limitations are self-imposed, and that the opportunities for you today are enormous beyond belief. It's rising above narrow-minded pettiness and prejudice. Thirdly, to use all your courage to force yourself to think positively on your own problem, to set a definite and clearly defined goal for yourself, to let your marvelous mind think about your goal from all possible angles, to let your imagination speculate freely upon many different possible solutions, to refuse to believe there are any circumstances sufficiently strong to defeat you in the accomplishment of your purpose, to act promptly and decisively when your course is clear, and to keep constantly aware of the fact that you are, at this moment, standing in the middle of your own acre of diamonds, as Russell Conwell used to point out. Fourth, save at least 10% of what you earn. It's also remembering that no matter what your present job, it has enormous possibilities if you're willing to pay the price. Now let's just go over the important points in the price each of us must pay to achieve the wonderful life that can be ours. It is, of course, worth any price. 1, you will become what you think about. 2, remember the word imagination. Let your mind soar. 3, courage. Concentrate on your goal every day. 4, save 10% of what you earn. And action. Ideas are worthless unless we act on them. There are 2 things that may be said of everyone. Each of us wants something, and each of us is afraid of something. I want you to write on a card what it is you want more than anything else. It may be more money. Perhaps you'd like to double your income or make a specific amount of money. It may be a beautiful home. It may be success at your job. It may be a particular position in life. It could be a more harmonious family. Each of us wants something. Write down on your card specifically what it is that you want. Make sure it's a single goal and clearly defined. You needn't show it to anyone, but carry it with you so that you can look at it several times a day. Think about it in a cheerful, relaxed, positive way each morning when you get up, and immediately you have something to work for, something to get out of bed for, something to live for. Look at it every chance you get during the day and just before going to bed at night. As you look at it, remember that you must become what you think about, and since you're thinking about your goal, you realize that soon it will be yours. In fact, it's yours really the moment you write it down and begin to think about it. Look at the abundance all around you as you go about your daily business. You have as much right to this abundance as any other living creature. It's yours for the asking. Now we come to the difficult part. Difficult because it means the formation of what is probably a brand new habit, and new habits are not easily formed. Once formed, however, it'll follow you for the rest of your life. Stop thinking about what it is you fear. Each time a fearful or negative thought comes into your consciousness, replace it with a mental picture of your positive and worthwhile goal. There will come times when you will feel like giving up. It's easier for a human being to think negatively than positively. That's why only 5% is successful. You must begin now to place yourself in that group. For 30 days, you must take control of your mind. It will think only about what you permit it to think. Each day for this 30-day test, do more than you have to do.
In addition to maintaining a cheerful, positive outlook, give of yourself more than you've ever done before. Do this knowing that your returns in life must be in direct proportion to what you give. The moment you decide on a goal to work toward, you're immediately a successful person. You're then in that rare and successful category of people who know where they're going. Out of every 100 people, you belong to the top 5. Don't concern yourself too much with how you're going to achieve your goal. Leave that completely to a power greater than yourself. All you have to do is know where you're going. The answers will come to you of their own accord. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For every one that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. It's as marvelous and as simple as that. In fact, it's so simple that in our seemingly complicated world it's difficult for an adult to understand that all he needs is a purpose and faith. For 30 days, do your best. If you're a salesman, go at it as you've never done before, not in hectic fashion, but with the calm, cheerful assurance that time well spent will give you the abundance in return you deserve and want. If you're a homemaker, devote your 30-day test to complete giving of yourself without thinking about receiving anything in return, and you'll be amazed at the difference it makes in your life. No matter what your job, do it as you've never done it before for 30 days. And if you've kept your goal before you every day, you'll wonder and marvel at this new life you've found. Dorothea Brand, outstanding editor and writer, discovered it for herself and tells about it in her fine book, Wake Up and Live. Her entire philosophy is reduced to the words, act as though it were impossible to fail. She made her own test, with sincerity and faith, and her entire life was changed to one of overwhelming success. Now you make your test for 30 full days. Don't start your test until you've made up your mind to stick with it. You see, by being persistent, you're demonstrating faith. Persistence is simply another word for faith. If you didn't have faith, you would never persist. If you should fail during your first 30 days, by that I mean suddenly find yourself overwhelmed by negative thoughts, you've got to start over again from that point and go 30 more days. Gradually, your new habit will form until you find yourself one of that wonderful minority to whom virtually nothing is impossible. Don't forget the card. It's vitally important as you begin this new way of living. On one side of the card, write your goal, whatever it may be. On the other side, write the words we've quoted from the Sermon on the Mount. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. In your spare time during your test period, read books that will help you. Inspirational books like the Bible, Dorothea Brand's Wake Up and Live, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and other books that instruct and inspire. Nothing great was ever accomplished without inspiration. See that during these crucial first 30 days, your own inspiration is kept at a peak. Above all, don't worry. Worry brings fear, and fear is crippling. The only thing that can cause you to worry during your test is trying to do it all yourself. Know that all you have to do is hold your goal before you. Everything else will take care of itself. Remember also to keep calm and cheerful. Calm and cheerful. Don't let petty things annoy you and get you off course. Now, since making this test is difficult, some may say, well, why should I bother? Well, look at the alternative. No one wants to be a failure. No one really wants to be a mediocre individual. No one wants a life constantly filled with worry, fear, and frustration. Therefore, remember that you must reap that which you sow. If you sow negative thoughts, your life will be filled with negative things. If you sow positive thoughts, your life will be cheerful, successful, and positive. Now, gradually, you will have a tendency to forget what you've heard on this record. Play it often. Keep reminding yourself of what you must do to form this new habit. Gather your whole family about and listen to what's been said here at regular intervals. You know, most men will tell you that they want to make money without understanding the law. The only people who make money work in the mint. The rest of us must earn money. This is what causes those who keep looking for something for nothing or a free ride to fail in life. The only way to earn money is by providing people with services or products which are needed and useful. We exchange our product or service for the other man's money. Therefore, the law is that our financial return will be in direct proportion to our service. Success is not the result of making money. Making money is the result of success. And success is in direct proportion to our service. Most people have this law backwards. They believe that you're successful if you earn a lot of money. The truth is that you can only earn money after you're successful. It's like the story of the man who sat in front of the stove and said to it, "Give me heat, and then I'll add the wood." How many men and women do you know, or do you suppose there are today, who take the same attitude toward life? There are millions. We've got to put the fuel in before we can expect heat. Likewise, we've got to be of service first before we can expect money. Don't concern yourself with the money. Be of service. Build, work, dream, create. Do this, and you'll find there's no limit to the prosperity and abundance that will come to you. Prosperity is founded upon a law of mutual exchange. Any person who contributes to prosperity must prosper in turn himself. Sometimes the return will not come from those you serve, but it must come to you from someplace, for that is the law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. As you go daily through your 30-day test period, remember that your success will always be measured by the quality and quantity of service you render, and money is a yardstick for measuring this service. No man can get rich himself unless he enriches others. There are no exceptions to a law. You can drive down any street in America and from your car estimate the service that's being rendered by the people living on that street. Had you ever thought of this yardstick before? It's interesting. Some, like ministers and priests and other devoted people, measure their returns in the realm of the spiritual, but again, their returns are equal to their service. Once this law is fully understood, any thinking person can tell his own fortune. If he wants more, he must be of more service to those from whom he receives his return. If he wants less, he has only to reduce this service. This is the price you must pay for what you want. If you believe you can enrich yourself by deluding others, you can only end by deluding yourself. It may take some time, but just as surely as you breathe, you'll get back what you put out. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking you can avert this. It's impossible. The prisons and the streets where the lonely walk are filled with people who tried to make new laws just for themselves. We may avoid the laws of man, but there are greater laws that cannot be broken. An outstanding medical doctor recently pointed out 6 steps that will help you realize success. 1. Set yourself a definite goal. 2. Quit running yourself down. 3. Stop thinking of all the reasons why you cannot be successful, and instead think of all the reasons why you can. 4. Trace your attitudes back through your childhood and try to discover where you first got the idea you couldn't be a success, if that's the way you've been thinking. 5. Change the image you have of yourself by writing out a description of the person you would like to be. And 6. Act the part of the successful person you have decided to become. The doctor who wrote those words is a noted West Coast psychiatrist, David Harold Fink, M.D. Do what all the experts since the dawn of recorded history have told you you must do. Pay the price by becoming the person you want to become. It's not nearly as difficult as living unsuccessfully. Make your 30-day test. Then repeat it. Then repeat it again. Each time it will become more a part of you until you'll wonder how you could ever have lived any other way. Live this new way, and the floodgates of abundance will open and pour over you more riches than you may have dreamed existed. Money? Yes, lots of it. But what's more important, you'll have peace. You'll be in that wonderful minority who lead calm, cheerful, successful lives. Start today. You have nothing to lose, but you have a life to win.